Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I want to thank Frida for opening up the home to our class. And today's class, the Refuah Shlema of Chaya Sarah Bat Simcha and Rachel Sarah Bat Jamil. And so everybody should have a Refuah Shlema coming up to the time of redemption and Geulah Pesach. So Judaism has revolutionized the world in many, many, many ways. Judaism, going back thousands of years, brought so many new ideas and ideas that even to this day are still cutting edge and ahead of its time. But perhaps the greatest thing that Judaism brought to the world is the premium that it has on education and scholarship and academics. If you go back to other ancient religions, they intentionally kept their population ignorant. One example of this was the Catholic Church was known to hide texts from their people. Only priests were allowed to make derivations of their stories, and they intentionally tried to make sure that their population was ignorant so that they could manipulate them and use the knowledge that they had to control their actions and what they did. Judaism was the complete opposite and remains the complete opposite. We put a premium on everybody studying Torah. Everybody has an obligation to learn, young, old, women, men. Everybody's encouraged to know. Everybody's encouraged to learn in order to be able to act, but also to know the great infinite wisdom that Hashem has given us. So Judaism has put a premium on scholarship and education. We're the first to have, the Rambam puts in a school system. He talks about how many children you should have in a class and how you should go about teaching them. At what age should people start school? What are the first things that you should start educating your kids about, and how we go about training them till they get older. I mean, it's things that psychologists and educators are coming up with now. Our Torah and our rabbis have already been put into our system thousands and thousands of years ago. Perhaps chief among the revolutionary educational things that Judaism has done is the Pesach Seder. If you want a masterpiece of rabbinic ideology about how to educate people, look no further than the night of the Pesach Seder. The night of the Seder is a blueprint as to how we're going to educate our children, how we're going to transmit our values and our priorities to the next generation. And not just for them to learn, but that key word is to transmit. You know, as a teacher, and we have other teachers in the room as well, you know that when you have to teach someone about something, you have to learn it in a much deeper way than just learning it, right? So everyone here is now a student. I'm the teacher. For me, I had to prepare by reading and mastering what it is that I'm about to teach. And maybe 40%, 30% of what I've learned to prepare for this class, I'm not even going to share with you. It's just part of the process of having learned before I've organized what it is that I'm going to share. Anybody who's taught something is you have to be a master of that subject matter. And then how you're going to transmit it is you're often going to take things and put them aside, what you're going to divulge, what you're not going to divulge. As a teacher, you have to be prepared for anything and everything, but you're not always going to teach everything that you learn to somebody else. What I'm trying to illustrate is when I teach somebody something that I want them to transmit to somebody else, I now have to educate them in a much deeper way than if I just wanted them to hold on to that information for themselves. What we're trying to do on the night of the Seder is not just educate our children, but we want to transmit information that in the future, our children will transmit then to the next generation. And when you're thinking about transmission, it's a much deeper type of understanding than just conveying information. Hence, the night of the Seder is an experiential experience, right? We're not just talking, we're also living, we're also eating, we're smelling, we're touching, we're feeling, we're acting, we're doing so many different things at the night of the Seder It is, right? So anybody who told you that rabbis feel that you should just sit at the head of the class and lecture, I mean, it's clear that that's false. The rabbi said, "Chayav adam leharot et atzmo, ki'ilu hu yatsa mimitzrayim." If we want our children to transmit the experience of Egypt, we have to give them that experience themselves in as best a way as we can create it. So my mother puts the plagues and everybody has the frogs and everybody's doing puppet shows and dressing up, and every home has their own flavor about how are we not just going to verbally tell the story, but how are we going to taste the story? How are we going to smell the story? How are we going to see the story, hear the story, touch the story? We're going to use every tool available to us to immerse ourselves in the story of Mitzrayim so that our children get that biggest experience they can, the most palpable experience, and that will ensure its transmission. And that's why it's a story that has gone on thousands of years, and we're still here telling it under the harshest of conditions, from Spanish Inquisition to Warsaw, Poland, to Deal, New Jersey. We've told this story and experienced it for thousands of years in all settings, in all conditions, everywhere in the world. So this is the challenge that we have to understand. And what I want us to try to do today is to use the model of the Seder to try and figure out how can we take some of those lessons of what we do on the night of Pesach and apply them to our education all year round. Because I think Jewish education is really strong. We have so many schools, we have so many teachers, we're so focused on Jewish education, but I think we have a long way to go. I think there's a lot of reform that we still need to make to really make our institutions the best that they could possibly be. So this class is a window into Pirke Abot, the statements of our rabbis. I want to share with you an opening Mishnah about, which might not seem at first like it's about education, but it is about learning. And I think from there, we'll segue to the Seder and try to pull out some of those ideas. The Mishnah is quoted in the name of the great Hillel Hazaken. Hillel says the following: En bur yerechet. Somebody who is an empty vessel cannot be a fearer of sin. If you want to be somebody who is a God-fearing person, you have to have knowledge, because you have to know what to stay away from. What am I or am I not allowed to eat? What am I or not allowed to say? You have to have knowledge and information in order to be someone who is fearful of God and fearful of sin. Velo am haaretz chasid. Likewise, if someone is an ignorant person, they cannot be pious, right? A very funny story that Rabbi tells in his book on Pirke Avot. He says there was once a man who lived across the street from the rabbi, and it was raining one day, and he saw through his window into the rabbi's house, he saw them lighting a match on Shabbat and lighting a candle, and he got all panicked. So he took his umbrella and he opened it up and he ran across the street to the rabbi's house, and he started yelling, knocking on the door, "Rabbi, you're not allowed to light fire on Shabbat. What are you doing?" And he opens up the door, and his wife is there in labor, ready to give birth. And he's lighting the candle because she needs to be able to see, and the midwife needs to be able to deliver the baby. And the rabbi looks at this man startled, and he says, you ran over to come and yell at me about, what I'm doing? He says, look what you just did. You opened an umbrella on Shabbat. You ran across the street without an eruv. You wrung out the umbrella in front of him. You must have done 4 or 5 different prohibitions, all in the process of trying to tell me what I wasn't doing instead of judging me favorably. That's what it means, lo am haaretz chasid. Someone who's ignorant cannot be pious. You think, I'm being so pious to run over to my neighbor and tell them what they're doing wrong. Meanwhile, you don't realize how many prohibitions you did in the interim, and you didn't even have enough knowledge to maybe give the benefit of the doubt as to why the person next door to you was doing what they were doing. So that's why knowledge and education is at the forefront of Judaism, because there's so much that we need to know in order to know what we're going to be able to do. Then come these next 2 statements that I want to dwell on. The first one is lo habaishan lamed. Someone who is ashamed or embarrassed cannot learn, cannot properly become educated. Velo hakapdan melamed. And an impatient teacher is not someone who can educate people. Let's think about those 2 statements and the relationship between them. Someone who is embarrassed cannot learn. Someone who is impatient cannot teach. Why? And how do those statements maybe relate to each other? Excellent. Exactly what we were thinking, right? Anybody had something to add? Is there anything was going to say? Yeah? That was going to say. Right? So the idea is that when a student is embarrassed to ask a question for fear of being ridiculed by the other students in the class, how could you not know that? Or, what kind of, where have you been? What kind of person are you? Or the teacher is going to mock them as well, or the teacher is going to lose patience. A student says, excuse me, Mr. So-and-so or Rabbi so-and-so or Mrs. whatever, I didn't really understand. Do you mind repeating it over for me again? Or I didn't really understand the homework or something. People are afraid to say that they didn't understand if what the response that they're going to get is, how could you not understand? Where were you yesterday? Weren't you listening in class? How hard is it to understand this material? This is ABCs. We have to go on to something else. If a teacher doesn't have patience with a student, they're not fostering a culture within their classroom of exploration, of searching, of being able to question. And so somebody who's embarrassed, too shy to ask a question, won't learn. And a teacher who's too impatient to allow for questions is not going to be someone who's going to teach. That is a stifled classroom, and education and Jewish learning is not going to take place on that. And there's no greater sign of Jewish education than the Pesach Seder, in that Pesach Seder is all about what? It's all about questions. The whole story is about questions. We open the night with Manishtana. We intentionally do odd things, eccentric behavior, just to trigger our children to ask questions. The whole night is born out through fostering a culture of searching and exploring through questioning what's in front of you. There's no such thing as a bad question at the Pesach Seder, and there really shouldn't be anything as a bad question anywhere within Jewish education, right? And so the rabbis tell us very powerful ideas. They say, let's say a person's doing the Pesach Seder with them and their husband, right? Just a woman, a man and a woman, no children around, right? How do they have to do the Seder? They still have to ask themselves the questions. The rabbis say if a person is doing the Seder alone, he has to ask himself or herself the questions. So the story cannot be told. You cannot fulfill your obligation of telling the Pesach story without it being born out of questions, because Judaism understands that questions are at the heart of what makes Jewish education. And so my question to us is, why? Why are questions so important? Why does education have to be done through questions? I've identified 4 reasons, but I'll open it up if anybody wants to share. Why do you think questions are so important? Julie.
I think that questions lead to more questions. It keeps the conversation going and moving and going deeper. Not accepting things as status quo.
Right.
Understanding the sources of things. I think it just leads to a deeper understanding.
So questions lead to deeper understanding. They keep the conversation going. I like that idea. In other words, they perpetuate more questions, more understanding. Excellent. Yeah.
It also gets you to think differently. And once you hear a certain response, you now respond differently with something else that you have to say, because you're thinking along different ways and learning how someone else may think to how you think, and then you could come to a different.
So questions open up an avenue for multiple ways of thinking. I love that idea, because if I'm a teacher and I'm simply relaying information without having a question at the start of where I'm going, right, then the student is just taking whatever the teacher is saying at face value. Okay, this is what it is. This is fact. This is the only way to think. It's just one road. If I, as a teacher, don't start with a question, then it just seems like I'm giving them information, taking this information, that's the end of it, and move on. And that's not what Judaism says is the truth when it comes especially to Torah. Our rabbis constantly say, Shiv'im panim la Torah, 70 different ways that a person could look at something. You could look at something from an emotional standpoint, from a physical standpoint, from a mental standpoint, right? You look at things differently depending on your age, your gender, where you are in life, right? I heard a very nice example. Think about reading the last passage of the Torah when Moshe Rabbeinu was about to pass away. Think about reading that passage when you're 10 years old, 40 years old, or 90 years old. Are all 3 of those people going to have the same perspective on that passage? Absolutely not. Because the stage in your life is how you're going to see that story. You're going to see it through the lens of what you've experienced, of what you've seen, of where you are. All of a sudden, a 10-year-old is looking at this elderly Moshe Rabbeinu passing away. They're thinking about my grandfather. They're thinking about my rabbi. When you're then in that position as Moshe, you're thinking about a totally different set of things. So our experiences in life cause us to think about things in the Torah differently. What's happened to us, what stage of life we are, our circumstances all cause us to think. That's the dynamic nature of Torah. But if I only told you this is what it is, then you have nothing from which to branch off of and to think differently out of the box. This is why, as teachers, when we devise a lesson plan, the first thing that we do when we devise a lesson plan is what? What's the question that we're starting with? What is the goal of my lesson? And what's the opening question? Very often an aim or a purpose will be some kind of a question. And the students know, okay, our goal is to answer this question. And there won't necessarily be only one answer to that question, because by posing the question, the teacher is opening up the possibility to people having different perspectives on it. Any other thoughts? Yeah,
I think also it's so important that the Torah encourages asking questions, because it eliminates doubt. So if you're asking questions, that means that there are answers there, and hopefully somebody will answer them for you in a way that you won't have doubt. That if somebody else outside the religion asks you that question, you won't be caught off guard and say, I don't know, which would show cracks. Because I know, like in the Catholic or in the Christian faith, you can't ask too many questions, because at some point there's a black hole that they can't answer.
Excellent, an excellent point. And I'm going to open that up in a little bit more, right? Because it sounds a little counterintuitive, right? Most people would be afraid to ask questions because they're afraid of the fact that they might not have answers, right? But Judaism has never promoted such a philosophy. Judaism is okay, and this is hard for people today, even today, with asking a question that might not have an answer to it. And in this day and age, that's not something that people love to sit with. It makes us feel very uncomfortable. And it wasn't something that other religions wanted to live with either, because they were nervous. If someone asks a question that we don't have an answer to, then they'll abandon the faith completely. It means that it's not real, that it's fake. And Judaism never looked at it that way. Judaism wants exploration, encourages questions, and encourages the toughest of questions. The most challenging questions is what Judaism wants us to ask. Let's take a step back for a minute and think about the greatest people in our history, in Jewish history, have asked some of the toughest questions and not received answers to those questions. Avraham Avinu, when God tells him about Sodom, comes right at God and says, Hashofet kol haaretz lo ya'aseh mishpat? Will the judge of all the land not make justice and righteousness? Avraham goes right after God with a question of, God, where is your justice? Show it to me. I want to see it. Moshe Rabbeinu tells God, Har'enina et kevodecha. I want to see your glory. Show me your glory, which many people interpret. He wanted to know, explain to me how this world works. Why are good people suffering? Why are bad people having prosperity? A question that Yirmiyahu echoed later on. Our greatest ancestors asked the toughest and most challenging questions. And what does God tell Moshe? Lo yir'ani ha'adam v'chai. You can't see me and live. You know what? You might just have to live with that question. Yeah.
God himself answers the first question.
Ah, very good.
And he says, Ayeka, it's the most existential question for us to ask ourselves, where are we?
Oh, absolutely.
That's how we were created.
Mhm. 100%. Yeah, 100%. What have you done, right? Who hamin ha'etz asher achalta? Did you eat from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from? Who told you that you're naked and you don't have clothing on? God is constantly asking them to the understanding of who he is and what he's living and what he's doing.
Also, off of that, maybe questions also create more of a dialogue.
They engage the person within it, right?
Instead of saying, why did you eat off that? No, you ate off that tree that was not allowed. It's, did you eat off the, like he's,
Yeah,
you know.
he wants Adam to reflect about himself, to think about his actions. He wants to give Adam the opportunity to take accountability for what he did, right? So as parents, we can learn from that episode tremendously. We see our children doing something wrong. Right away, we tend to go into accusatory mode, or we just go straight into consequence mode without giving the child an opportunity to think about what they've done, right? And by the way, I'll just take a moment to a quick point that I think is very important. Erica Brown brings this up in her Haggadah. She says, we are very often into why questions. So when your son or daughter does something, what's the first question everybody asks them? Why did you do that, right? Now, I want you to step back for a minute and think about how that question posits in the brain of a teenager. Why did you do that? How are they interpreting that question? Negative. It's an accusatory question, right? That's why you don't get very many responses when you ask a child. The answer is, I don't. They're going to give you a dumb answer like, I don't know, right? Or even though they really do know, or they're just going to be silent. They're not going to give you anything, right? A why question is very often accusatory, and it's you trying to pry into them, and nobody wants to do that. Change a why question into a what question. What, not, I wouldn't say what were you thinking, but what do you think made you do that? Think about how that question resonates with the child, right? What do you think made you do that? Or what do you think caused that to happen, right? No, it's very different. I think the child processes that very different. It's really you trying to open up to them and say, what is it that led to that? And how do you think we can fix that in the future, right? Huh? You'd be surprised how it's well, first of all, it's a lot also about intonation and what you're saying, like, why did you do that, right? That's a bit. But if you sit down a child after they've done something and said, I'm trying to understand what brought you to that. Like, give me a window into your mindset, right? How do you think we could have changed that in the future, right? All of a sudden, that's a very different attitude from a parent towards a child. A child might turn and say, it was because this did that to me, right? So all of a sudden, you're hitting on a part of their brain that now is not feeling like they're on the defensive, but is getting them to think about their actions and what happened to cause them to do something, the cause and effect nature of it. And I think it makes a big difference. Yeah.
They're actually not the parent, but the teacher or the one who's, clarifying.
Yeah.
Posting, you saying, what the heck did you do? We gotta explain themselves.
It's trying to understand really from their perspective. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think that is a big thing. So I'll give you a couple of ideas that we've already mentioned here, and we'll expand upon them a little bit. The first reason that I brought down is that students become part of the learning process. When you engage students or children in questions, they feel like they're part of their own education. And everybody's going to be more enthusiastic about learning and exploring when they feel like they're part of the decision-making process in their own education. Because every child can ask questions and understands a little bit about what they want to learn and wants to be intrigued by what they're studying. So unfortunately, I feel like the majority of our curriculums that we have in school are all decided by people on the higher ups and are jammed down the throats of our children. Now, of course, I said that in a little bit of an extreme way, but of course, sometimes children don't know what they want to learn or they don't know what's important for them to learn. So sometimes, yes, we have to make those decisions. But as children grow and mature, they are very aware, and we don't give them enough credit for the fact that they are aware of what's going on around them and what things are interesting to them and what things they might want to explore and learn. 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th graders, they're much more capable than we give them credit for. And because we're a little bit stuck in these rigid boxes, we tend to limit their creative ability. We tend to not let them have a part or a say in their own education. And that's why you get a lot of long faces when kids come home after a long day of school, is because nothing that they learned during that day was anything that they wanted to learn. It's all what a bunch of adults in a room decided they have to learn. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't things that students have to learn. They do. They're not always going to be scintillated, but we should at least have some kind of a balance of a give and take. Elective choices, things that kids are curious about that would be very meaningful to them. And having them ask questions gives them some ownership in their education. And anytime someone feels like they're not being forced to do something, but they have accountability and ownership in what they're doing, they're going to be much more enthusiastic about getting that to be the case. And sometimes even as adults, we have to light a fire under them. Like we said, sometimes they don't know, but we can find creative and interesting ways to light a fire under them, to trigger them to ask questions. So at the night of the Seder, we have one son who's the she'eno yodea lish'ol. He does not know how to ask questions. He hasn't reached that stage in his life. His mind is not mature enough to ask questions. So we do special things, odd things, silly things to get him to ask that question so that now he feels like he or she is part of that learning process. We as parents and teachers and educators have to find better ways, more creative ways to pull our students into the learning process to make them creative. There is a very cutting edge type of educational system called project-based learning that a lot of schools are starting to put into their curriculum, which is give the students a project to do. Let them learn the material through the project. I don't mean let them study it and then make a project. And making a project after you've studied the material is a form of assessment. And that's good. We should have different ways of assessing. I'm talking about letting them learn as they are doing something, right? So you want to teach someone about the Mishkan? Let them build their own Mishkan. Let them go outside and build it. Let them do something with architecture. Let them cut, let them sew, let them weave, let them do those things, not after they've studied it, as they're studying it. So let them know, hey, what challenges do we have when we're building something? What are some of the issues that we have when we're weaving something or sewing something? What are some obstacles that the Jewish people might have met as that they were building that you met while you were building, right? A lot of this sounds a little crazy and it might be hard to implement, right? You have to think, but it's something that's worth thinking a little bit about. And the more ownership that children have over their education, the more enthusiastic they'll be about it, the more you can get amazing, amazing things out of students, right? I mean, we have students that are building businesses. I have students that are making more money than me. I'm being honest with you. We do. Some of them, their parents are sitting in this room, right? Okay. I'm being honest. They have understanding of business. They have understanding of technology. They're ahead of the game. They have tremendous eagerness to do such a thing. I mean, I'll call Julia, right? I'm talking to, I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to understand Gabe's business, and he talks to me, and I'm saying, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I'm a dinosaur, and I'm 33. I'm not that old. I'm a dinosaur. And this is a 9th grader who built a business for himself and is doing great things. So to say, I bring that up only because to say that, we always think, they're only 14. They don't know how to do that. They know how to do a lot more than we give them credit for. They know how to raise money. They know how to make organizations. They know how to build businesses. They know how, and they can figure it out. And they have so many resources available to them. We can't stifle them. That's the biggest problem. Adults stifling them will be the thing that gets in their way of them progressing and moving, forging ahead. So the first thing about questions is it gets engagement from the student. It gets them to have ownership over it. The second thing is what Grace said. It enforces the idea that Judaism is not afraid of questions. Other religions believed in the concept of blind faith. And so you had to just accept. And questions were the devil. In fact, Socrates, who developed the Socratic method, was thrown in prison for corrupting the minds of the young Greek children because you were asking too many questions and you need to be silenced and just keep your mouth shut because we have to indoctrinate our children. Not silencing people and not allowing them to ask questions is indoctrination. And indoctrination is not the same as education. They're two polar opposites of each other. So I want to read to you a line from Rabbi Sax's Haggadah, which I think is a really important idea. He writes the following: religious faith has often been seen as naive, blind, and accepting. That is not the Jewish way. Judaism is not the suspension of critical intelligence. It contains no equivalent to the famous declaration of the Christian thinker Tertullian, I believe it because it is impossible. That's what Christianity says. I believe it because it's impossible. And if I don't want to understand it, I don't want to explain it, I want it to remain impossible. That's the only way it's faith. Because if I can make sense of it, now it's not faith anymore. Now it's intelligence. To the contrary, Judaism says, asking a question is itself a profound expression of faith in the intelligibility of the universe and the meaningfulness of human life. Meaning that when God created the world, he intended for human beings to understand him through the world that he created. And how do you do that? By asking questions, by looking at the world, by studying it, by going through a scientific method to understand it better. And the very fact that we're asking questions, that is the sign of our faith that Hashem exists. because we're saying nothing here is random. It's all been put together by an infinite, intelligent being who wants us to discover it. So asking it means that I believe in Hashem, not the opposite way around, where not asking tells me that I just believe everything is as it is. That's going to distance me from faith. Judaism is the polar opposite of how Christians were thinking. To ask is to believe that somewhere there is an answer. The fact that throughout history, people have devoted their lives to extending the frontiers of knowledge is a compelling testimony to the restlessness of the human spirit, a constant desire to go further, higher, and deeper. Far from faith excluding questions, questions testify to faith, that history is not random, that the universe is not impervious to our understanding, that what happens to us is not blind chance. We ask not because we doubt, but because we believe. That's a beautiful, beautiful line. We ask not because we doubt, but because we believe. Questions are a manifestation of our belief that God exists and wants us to connect to him by understanding more about him, the world, and most importantly, about ourselves. And so asking questions about ourselves, about others, is the most profound way to express your belief in Hashem. Now, does that mean you're going to get an answer to every question? You're not going to get an answer to every question, but that's okay. I want to read to you something that Erica Brown brings in her Haggadah. He quotes in 1903 a poet named Rilke, who wrote in the Letters of a Young Poet. I want to read to you this one. It says, have patience with everything unresolved in your heart. Sometimes it's okay to ask a question, and you don't have to have an answer in 5 seconds. You're not a bad person or don't believe or anything. I'm not sure of the answer right now. Maybe in the future I'll discover an answer. Maybe circumstances in my life will push me to an answer. Maybe Hashem will guide me towards an answer that I wouldn't have gotten if I wasn't patient and I never asked the question. It says, have patience with things that are unresolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves as if they were locked rooms or books written in a very foreign language. Do not search for the answers which could not be given to you now, because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps then someday, far into the future, you will gradually, without even noticing it, live your way into an answer. What a beautiful idea. That you can sometimes ask a question. You ask a question like, what's the purpose of life? How are you going to get an answer to that question in 5 minutes, right? How can somebody come? I mean, the teenagers ask us, Rabbi, what's the purpose of life? Why am I here? What's the goal? You're 12, right? You're not going to have an answer to that question now, right? But let's believe we have a purpose. We're here for a reason. We believe in a God. Tell me what you think your purpose is now, and then hold on to that question. Write it down, keep it in your pocket, put it in your wallet, carry it with you wherever you go. And when something happens to you in life, pull it out and say, maybe this is my purpose. Oh, this adds another piece to what my life is like. And over the course of your life, you will live your purpose, right? You're not going to have an answer to that question at 12. If you had the answer to that question at 12, then all right, we're done, right? You're going to have to go through your life and live it in order to gain an answer to those questions. So some of those profound questions, deep questions, the mysteries of the universe, you have to be able to ask yourself that question, be mindful of it, carry it with you, and progressively help yourself answer it as things happen to you in life. And you live that answer as you go. And if you're mindful of it, you'll see Hashem will direct you in ways that you'll start to find answers slowly but surely, like the Hansel and Gretel breadcrumb trail that God leaves for you to eventually reach. What is it that they're looking for at the end of the day? I don't know. Back to whatever your destination is. I forget the gingerbread house, whatever. Little Red Riding. I was going to say Little Red Riding Hood, but then I was mixing up things back to the different whatever. Bedtime's been very hazy lately. So anyway, so that's the idea. Judaism loves questions, and it loves questions that we can't always answer. It's not afraid of that. We want it, we encourage it, we search for it, and the only way to really uncover the deepest, most important things in life is by asking those questions and then living our lives and searching and enjoying the process of searching and exploring it, and really relishing and loving the fact that it's okay, I'm living with a little bit of a question, but I'm trying to uncover it. I'm looking everywhere for that answer. That's the mission of life. That's what gives you motivation and excitement and fervor of waking up every day saying to yourself, maybe today's the day that I'm going to find my purpose or a purpose for now, because not everybody doesn't only have one purpose in life, right? Let's take a look at another answer that I brought, and then I'll also give you some limitations on that. Another answer that I put down over here is questions open up the doors for different types of learning. No two people are exactly the same. We were hitting on this a little bit before. Every one of us thinks differently. Every one of us has a different type of intelligence. Some of us do great with numbers. Some of us are better at reading. Some of us are more scientific. Some of us are more emotional. Some of us are more spatial. I stink with my hands, right? I can't build a drawer if my life depended on it, right? But other people love to touch and feel. Other people love to get their hands dirty. They're experiential learners. Every one of us thinks differently, learns differently, relates to the world differently. And so again, if we just cookie cut everybody, which I think sometimes our modern forms of education do, unfortunately, cookie cut everybody into everybody has to be an auditory visual learner, because that's just the easiest way. That's the way school has been for so long. We don't give opportunities for other types of learners, other types of interest, other ways that people think to get in touch with, well, maybe I learn a little bit differently. Maybe I need to get outside to be able to learn. Maybe inside the classroom is not for me 100%, or at least I have to have a balance a little bit. When you have a question, when you're asking questions, it gives opportunities for different answers, for different perspectives, for different angles, for different ways of thinking to be able to come to the forefront. And that involves everybody in the process. Notice how at the Seder we have 4 different children. A Hacham, a Rasha, a Tam, a She'en Yodeh V'Sh'al, right? No one's bad and no one's good. They're all around the table. They're all discussing it. We might treat them a little differently. We answer them a little bit differently according to their level and where they're at, but they're all welcome to come and sit at the Seder, right? They're all welcome to come and converse. I saw a very nice explanation that the 4 different children might actually be all of us the same, just progressing through life. We all start as the person who can't answer a question. And then eventually we become simpletons. We get to a point where we can ask basic questions. Then we hit the teenage years and we're cynical, we're the Rasha, right? For those who have teenagers, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? You hit the teenage years and you're wild and you're chaotic and you're antagonizing everything and you're questioning. And eventually through that whole process, where do you end up? If you do it right, as a Hacham. Eventually you can use all of that to get to wisdom. So if you're nervous, my kid is very sarcastic, is a little cynical, it's all part of a process. Continue to do the right things, continue to open up to them, continue to let them have a seat at that conversation, and you will see that things will eventually evolve, because that's what the rabbis tell us that they're going to do. The last thing that I wrote here is that questions foster a culture of imperfection. And this is maybe my most favorite one, because learning happens by making mistakes. And this is something that I regret to say is a major, major failure of our current system, not just in our own school, but everywhere. Grades are destroying education. They are. I'm sorry. I know people are going to say, Rabbi, too modern, you're too progressive, you're too this. I'm sorry. They are. Why? Because students are so obsessed with the fact that when they take a test, they can get nothing wrong. They can get nothing wrong. I cannot tell you how many tears, how much stress. Okay, you're all moms, you're all, you know, the panic, the chaos, the stress of I cannot get anything wrong, otherwise I will not be a successful human being in life is insanity. It's insanity what we've done. It's insanity what we've done. Literally spoken to 9th graders who have told me, if I get this wrong, I'm not getting into college, I'm not going to be a businessman, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that, and I'm done for. In what world is that normal? Yeah.
My proudest test of my it's a test that the teacher gave her in the 80s and she taught for the 90s because her answers were also right. And she came back to the teacher and said, your answer that you thought was right, but my answers are also right. So go back and look at it and see how my point of view. And the teacher was like, you know what, you're right. And then you come back to those points.
So I love that idea. Yeah, I love that idea.
Every question has the same answer,
right.
The right answer.
So that's a great idea, but I'll even take it a step further. Kudos to the teacher that they're humble enough to admit and to take it in. Rabbi Joey Beta just told us a story a couple of weeks back. I don't know if anyone remember about a student who got like a 98 on a chemistry test and told the teacher, but I got the answer right. They got one question wrong and proceeded to email like 15 college professors about this question. And they came back that he was right. And so he got the points. So I like fighting for yourself, but I'm going to go a little bit different. To me, the best test is the one that a child got a 70 and then retook it and got a 90, or something like that. Learned from their mistakes, right? The job of an assessment is to see where am I now, and then to see where can I get to, right? If you're supposed to make mistakes in life. Nobody does the presentation the right time, the first time. That's why you do a rough draft when you write an essay and you give it to the teacher and you make corrections and you write it again. And there's process in life, right? So we're taking that away from our youth, right? The idea that it's okay to make a mistake and then to correct it. I was having a debate with a teacher in school about I let my students correct their tests. When I give them back, I let them correct their tests. And the other teacher was saying, I can't do that. I said, why not? She said, then they won't take the test the first time seriously because they know that they could correct it. So we spoke a little bit about how I do a grading scale and let them get some points back and let them get other ones. And we had a nice conversation about it. But I said, I cannot be an educator and believe that you get one shot. I just can't. It's antithetical to what education is. There's no such thing as you got one shot, and if you didn't get it, this is what you are. You are a 70. No, I'm sorry. You have to be able to improve. That's the point of education. You should be able to do something, do a task. You make a mistake, you should be able to correct it. You should be able to learn from that mistake. The halachot that I know the best, I can tell you right now, the halachot that I know the best, they're on the tip of my fingers, are the ones that I messed up on with people. Someone asked me a question, I got the answer wrong. I ended up having to look back up, ask another rabbi, I got the answer wrong. I will never forget that halakha again because I have a story attached to it in which I made a mistake. And that's okay. The Torah allows for that to make a mistake, but that's how you learn. You learn through your mistakes, and we're taking that away from our children. And that's what questions are about. It's about fostering a culture within learning where you can ask a question, you can make a mistake, you can not know something, you're not expected to know everything, and then you can learn within that environment. And that's the type of environment that I want to be a part of. That's the type of environment that the Rambam says we have to foster as teachers. That's what it means, lo hakapdan melamed, that an impatient teacher, someone who's not willing to take that question over and over and over again. The Gemara tells a story about a rabbi, his name was Rabbi Pirke, who taught his student the same halakha every single day, 400 times. Now, maybe that's an exaggeration, I don't know. The bottom line is, he had a student who was putting in their effort, who wanted to know. The teacher's job is to sit there and explain it to them in 95 different ways until the student can get it. As long as they're trying, as long as they're making an effort and they're sitting there, I, as a teacher, have to do it as many times as it takes for them to figure it out. Mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake, it doesn't matter. To give up on a student who's trying to learn is the ultimate antithetical notion of Jewish education. It's impossible. You can't go about doing it that way. Now, if the student is being lazy, if the student is not trying, if the student is not putting in their effort, that's a whole different conversation. I'm not going to sit there and explain it to them over and over again when they have the capability and they're just not meeting that standard. That the student needs help in meeting their responsibility. But assuming they are, I have every obligation to go over it as many times as necessary. The Rambam says a beautiful idea about students. He says, a student should never say, I understand something when I don't understand it. I've had this happen to me. I got called out on it. Rabbi Aluf called me out on it. I left the shiur almost crying because he's an intimidating figure, right? I mean, to say the least, right? So we're sitting there, we're learning, we're going through a Tosafot, we're asking it, we're going through it. He explains it once, he explains it twice. Now he explains it twice. I'm looking around at the class. It seems like everybody else got it. So he looked right at me. He said, David, hevanta? And I said, hevanti. He said, tasbir, explain. I said, I didn't understand. So he started, he in a loving way, he started berating me. Why'd you say that you understood? I would have explained it to you again. What if I didn't ask you to explain it? You would have lost out on the Tosafot. He said, never ever. And he opened up this Rambam. He said, never ever tell me you understand if you don't understand. I'll explain it a third time. I'll explain it a fourth time. He said, I'm here. That's what my job is. I'm here to explain it as many times as long as you're putting in the proper effort. But don't ever say I understood something just because you think that and then, by the way, we looked around the room. Anybody understand that? Nobody got it. Nobody. We looked around the class. Nobody got it. So everyone was giving like these pretend we understand faces because we're all petrified to say we didn't get it, right? And make the rabbi go over it again. But that's what his job is. So you have to foster. And from that day on, the rabbi really did. And he always did. He always fostered and encouraged a sense of if you're doing your due diligence, you should ask, and you can ask, and you can go over. And look, maybe if for the 5th time, he might say, come to me afterwards, meet me in my office, something like that, so as not to hold up the rest of the class. Okay, a teacher has to take that into account, but you have to have that type of a fostering of an education where people can make mistakes, people can ask questions. Otherwise, really, what are we doing? How is a person going to go about learning? So I think this is a very important thing that we have to do more with our students, more with our children. A beautiful line Rabbi Sachs puts in, he says, when your kid comes home, what do we all ask our child? How was your day? What else? What's maybe the second question? What'd you learn today? Right? He says, don't ask what you learned today. He says, ask who asked a good question today in class. Try that. Who asked a good question today in class? Or what questions did you guys ask today in school? He says, that's how you know. Judaism has always valued a great question, much more, by the way, than an answer. Anybody can come up with an answer. To ask a question is to unlock a door into an understanding that you didn't have before. So I think for us, we have to rethink our ways of relating to our children, relating to education, making it a more open atmosphere, a more searching and exploratory atmosphere, more experiential. We should not be afraid to rethink the ways that we're educating our children, because I'm not so sure that how we're doing it is how our rabbis 3,000 years ago intended for us to be doing it today. And so you can go up to somebody and say, I think we should rethink this. They're going to tell, oh, you're very new school. Very new school? I'm actually very old school, because 3,000 years ago, our rabbis told us to do this, and we've changed it. So we're new school, and really we should go back to being what the old school method is, of openness, of questioning, of exploration, of searching, of making an area of time where students can make mistakes and they can explore themselves and learn themselves in the world.